Bilbo Baggins was not a warrior, a king, or a wizard. He was a simple hobbit, content with the comforts of home. Yet among all who bore the One Ring, he resisted its corruption better than most. The ring was imbued with Sauron's malice and carried an insidious will of its own. Kings fell before its influence, wizards were tempted beyond reason, and even the kind-hearted Frodo succumbed. But Bilbo endured its grasp longer than any mortal before him. Well met, my friends. This is the Fantasy Ranger. Today we'll cover the key reasons the One Ring failed to corrupt our dear Bilbo. Stick around for the most crucial one at the end. Bilbo's resistance to the ring can be traced to the very nature of hobbits. Unlike men, elves, or dwarves, hobbits had no great ambitions beyond the pleasures of hearth and home. They sought no dominion over others, nor did they yearn for grand legacies. Bilbo in particular exemplified this trait. His heart was filled with simple joys, food, friendship, and stories by the fire. Unlike those who viewed the ring as a means to an end, Bilbo never saw it as anything more than a useful trinket. This lack of greed and lust for power made him uniquely resilient. Hobbits, as a race, were designed to cherish community over control. Their isolated existence in the Shire shielded them from the corrupting struggles of the wider world. Without the burden of war or the thirst for supremacy, they remained an anomaly in Middle-earth. This very nature acted as an invisible shield, allowing Bilbo to hold the ring without succumbing to its whispering promises of dominion. Even when he possessed the ring, Bilbo did not wield it as a tool for conquest. He used it sparingly, mostly as a means of escape rather than influence. It did not feed into any deep-seated hunger for control because he had none. It was this simple, unburdened nature that kept him from falling prey to the ring's grip. However, being a hobbit couldn't be the only reason for Bilbo's resistance. Smeagol was a hobbit and he took his friend's life for the ring. So what else was it? Unlike others, Bilbo acquired the One Ring by accident. He stumbled upon it in the depths of the Misty Mountains, unaware of its significance. Had he been a man of greater ambition, he might have seized it for other things. But Bilbo simply took it as a strange prize for his unexpected adventure. His lack of intent meant that he never forged a deep connection to the ring in the way that Gollum, Frodo, or even Sauron himself did. More importantly, Bilbo's nature was defined by kindness and mercy. The clearest example of this came when he spared Gollum's life, despite having the perfect opportunity to end it. In that moment he was armed, invisible, and in grave danger, yet he chose not to strike. This act of pity, as Gandalf later remarked, had far-reaching consequences. It not only preserved Gollum's role in the eventual destruction of the ring, but also shielded Bilbo from the darkness that so often came with it. But if being kind and compassionate was all it took, then why did Frodo fail? He also had these qualities. Bilbo's ability to resist the ring was also shaped by the time in which he possessed it. Unlike Frodo, who carried the burden of the ring during the height of Sauron's resurgence, Bilbo held it during a period of relative quiet. At the time, Sauron had not fully revealed himself, and his malice had not yet reached its peak. This meant that the ring's influence, while insidious, lacked the amplified potency that it later exerted over Frodo. Additionally, Bilbo spent most of his years with the ring in the secluded comfort of the Shire, far from the dark forces that actively sought it. Unlike Gollum, who was tormented by isolation, or Frodo, who carried the ring ever closer to Mordor, Bilbo lived a peaceful life, largely untouched by external threats. Without the immediate pressure of Sauron's will bearing down upon him, the ring's grip remained weaker than it otherwise might have been. Another factor was the limited time frame in which Bilbo actively used the ring. While he possessed it for decades, he rarely called upon its power. The longer one wielded the ring, the more it fed upon their spirit. But Bilbo, using it only on rare occasions and never as a tool of power, gave it fewer opportunities to erode his will. Had Bilbo held the ring in a different time, when Sauron's gaze was fully fixed upon reclaiming it, it is possible he would have faced a much greater challenge in resisting its pull. But as fate would have it, he carried it during an era where its power had not yet fully awakened. Nonetheless, it wasn't long before Bilbo discovered the ring's corruption on his own. Over the years, Bilbo became increasingly aware of the ring's influence on his body and mind. Unlike Gollum, Bilbo had an unusual self-awareness. He noticed how it made him feel stretched, how it lingered in his thoughts more than it should. Rather than ignoring these signs, he acknowledged them, an act that set him apart from others who had fallen under its sway. His reflective nature played a crucial role in keeping the ring from fully dominating him. He had the wisdom to see that, though it granted him moments of advantage, it was beginning to take something from him in return. This realization gave him the foresight to make a decision few ring-bearers ever could, to willingly let it go. When the time came for him to part with the ring, Bilbo hesitated, but only briefly. Instead, with great effort and Gandalf's guidance, he relinquished it to Frodo. This act of surrender, done of his own volition, was perhaps his greatest testament to his resilience. Unlike so many others who clung to the ring until it consumed them, Bilbo proved that strength is not in possession, but in the ability to let go. However, the most important factor for Bilbo's resistance was not Bilbo himself, but Professor Tolkien. Tolkien's evolving vision of Middle-earth required an adjustment to Bilbo's portrayal, particularly in relation to the ring's corrupting influence. In The Hobbit, the ring was initially a simple magical trinket, aiding Bilbo's adventure without much consequence. However, as the Lord of the Rings took shape, the ring's role deepened into one of malevolent power, capable of eroding the will of its bearer. Yet despite this shift, Tolkien preserved Bilbo's earlier innocence, ensuring he remained distinct from the tragic figures who fell under the ring's sway. This narrative evolution highlights Bilbo's ability to resist moral corruption. Unlike Gollum or Boromir, who struggled against its growing hold, Bilbo was written to maintain a degree of separation from the ring's darkest effects. This was not due to a lack of exposure. After all, Bilbo possessed the ring for decades, but rather because Tolkien deliberately maintained his character's integrity. He was meant to be a contrast to those who succumbed, serving as an example of tempered resistance. The revisions in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings ensured that Bilbo's story fit within the broader legendarium without requiring him to be rewritten. Instead, Bilbo remained the charming and good-natured hobbit who, while touched by the ring's influence, was never truly controlled by it. Nevertheless, after leaving the ring behind, Bilbo did have his struggles, something that was well translated into the movies. Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy masterfully brings to life the insidious power of the One Ring. The films highlight the ring's weight on Bilbo in key moments. When he encounters Frodo in Rivendell and asks to see the ring once more, his face momentarily transforms into something grotesque, hungry, desperate, and unrecognizable. This brief moment encapsulates how the ring lingers in his soul, even after years apart. It is a visual representation of the creeping corruption Tolkien described, showing that Bilbo, who resisted better than most, was not entirely free of its grasp. Anyways, subscribe for more.